Good afternoon, everyone. The first item of business is debate on motion 20625 in the name of Fiona Hislop on recognising Scotland in Europe. Would those members who wish to speak in the debate press the request, or would those members who are speaking in the debate press the request to speak buttons, please? And I call on Fiona Hislop to speak to and move the motion for 6 minutes, please, Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, this debate is a direct consequence of Scotland being removed from the European Union against the clear majority view expressed by the people of Scotland in 2016. Most importantly, it is an opportunity for Parliament to stand firm in solidarity for all the EU citizens, 230,000 of them who live in Scotland. These citizens will be most immediately and directly affected by the UK leaving the EU on Friday. This Parliament has also repeatedly voted to express its opposition to Brexit in any form. And I believe that we must do what we can to demonstrate publicly our regret at what is about to happen on Friday. We need to give practical demonstration of the sense of loss that so many of us in this chamber and beyond will feel when we are no longer members of the European Union. The Scottish Government, for its part, has determined to fly the European flag in solidarity with EU citizens living here at St Andrew's House and Victoria Quay routinely, except where we are marking specific other occasions. Some, of course, will seek to criticise our actions as purely symbolic, but at times of uncertainty and disruption, symbolism and the values of symbols and what they represent do matter. The Parliament has in the past... No, I'm not giving way. The Parliament has, Presiding Officer, the Parliament has in the past flown different flags in solidarity with different peoples at different times. I have lost count of the number of times EU citizens in Scotland have thanked me for the way the Scottish Government and members of this Parliament have stood up publicly for their post-Brexit rights here in Scotland and in the rest of the UK. Flying the European flag is a concrete and visible expression of the value that we place on the contribution that the 230,000 EU citizens who live and work here in Scotland make to our country. That contribution is beyond question. I give way to Liz Smith.
I'm grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for giving way. Does she recognise that there are values within this Parliament, some of which are on the mace in front of us, which are about how this Parliament works, and that this debate is much more about that than it is about flags?
Fiona Hislop.
I will cover these points later in my speech. Our simple message to those EU citizens living here in Scotland, a message is that we want you to stay. Scotland is your home as it is our home, and that we want you to feel welcome. And in the coming days, weeks and months ahead, we will stand in solidarity with you at this time of great uncertainty. And flying the European flag is one way for Parliament to give practical expression to those views. This is the human dimension of Brexit. Families, many of whom have settled here for years, now feel uncertain about their futures. They deserve our support at this moment, in particular, in their place, their national parliament. EU citizens are our citizens. Almost 3,000 of my constituents are EU citizens. So when people say we should debate health or education and housing instead, they forget... Presiding Officer, they forget that EU citizens are our constituents, and they are our teachers, they are our doctors, they are our nurses. They build our houses and they care for our vulnerable, and our services will suffer without them. It's also reflecting on the fact that regardless of Brexit...
Point of order, Neil Findlay.
I don't know if it's the same with other parties. My party has no backbench speakers in this debate. I would have thought it would have been very much in order for the Cabinet Secretary, who is leading this debate on behalf of the Government, to take some intervention from backbenchers. That's a frontbencher. Don't you know that's a frontbencher?
That is not a valid point of... Mr Findlay, please be quiet. That's not a valid point of order. It is up to the Speaker whether or not they take interventions. The format of this debate was agreed in the Business Bureau with all parties. Fiona Hislop.
It is also worth reflecting on the fact that regardless of Brexit, the UK will remain a member of the Council of Europe, and the European Convention of Human Rights, which is overseen by the Council, is embedded in every action we take in this Parliament. The European flag was in fact first adopted by the Council in 1955. It was only in 1985 that the then European communities adopted the flag. Therefore, even after Brexit, we will maintain an important relationship with the European flag. The aims of the Council of Europe speak directly to the values on which this Parliament is based. A joint endeavour to build peace and prosperity together while respecting democracy, human rights, the rule of law and diversity. Why should we publicly distance the Parliament from that institution? Presiding Officer, the fact that we're holding this debate today to seek to give a direction to the corporate body is not a step that we have taken lightly. And I agree. Presiding Officer, Liz Smith made a point which I am trying to address in my response. The fact we are holding this debate today is to seek to give a direction to the corporate body, and it is not a step that we have taken lightly. And I agree.
Point of order, Mike Rumbles.
Clarification, please, on the motion. I read it in the business bulletin. It was about a direction to the corporate body. Is that the case, that the government is trying to interfere with Parliament to direct the corporate body to change its mind?
The corporate body is part of this Parliament, and this Parliament is now debating items relevant to the corporate body. Fiona Hislop.
Indeed, that's the point I was coming on to. In the fact that we're holding this debate today for the Parliament to seek to give a direction to the corporate body is not a step we have taken lightly, and I agree that it should not happen regularly, and I would resist that occurrence. But it is not the first time, so it is wrong to say that this is unprecedented. On the 6th of December in 2007, a motion from the Labour Party, supported by the Conservatives and the Liberals, instructed the corporate body to set up the Calman Commission. It was opposed at the time by the minority SNP government.
Point of order, Mike Rumbles.
I must be a little deaf, Presiding Officer, because I may be misunderstanding what the government are suggesting. Could I just ask for clarification? Did they suggest that the Parliament instructed the previous corporate body to overturn the decision? Did they do that?
The content of any speech is that of the Cabinet Secretary. If she wishes to repeat that point, I'm sure you will hear it clearly if other members in the chamber would so allow.
I have said it, I think, 3 times now, so I'm quite happy for the member to read the official report to understand the precedent I'm talking about, not one that should be used or used. I'm about to finish. Presiding Officer, with grace, if you can give me a few moments to complete what I have to say. I am one of the few members in this place who has served on the Parliamentary Bureau, and I know full well the importance of seeking to reach cross-party consensus within Parliament institution, and above all on the corporate body. The role of the Presiding Officer in reading the...
Excuse me, Cabinet Secretary. The Cabinet Secretary is coming to a close. There shall be no more interventions. Cabinet Secretary.
The role of the Presiding Officer in reading the mood of parliamentarians across the chamber is key within this. The Scottish Government has always accepted that the corporate body's decision to change the policy was made with the aim of being non-political. However, and I say this with greatest respect to those members of the corporate body who reached that decision, I do not believe that their decision reflects the views of the Parliament as a whole. Nor do I believe that the decision could be non-political, whatever the outcome had been reached. So on that basis, I believe it is appropriate for all of the Parliament to be given the opportunity to express its views, just as the Calman Review set up did before it. So I should stress that in order to avoid the situation, the Government has also sought to find a compromise, unfortunately unrealised. Parliament should send, Presiding Officer, a clear and symbolic signal that even after Friday, we want to maintain strong bonds with our European friends and neighbours, that we continue to share the same fundamental values that their citizens, our constituents who live in Scotland, who will continue to be valued and respected, mean to us. Presiding Officer, I move the motion in my name.
Point of order, Neil Findlay.
This Parliament is, if we follow the motion, is about to overturn a decision of the corporate body. I think that's for the first time. If that's the case, would that not be tantamount to a vote of no confidence in the corporate body? And has the Chair had any indication as to what members of the corporate body might do at that situation?
That's not technically a point of order. However, I would refer the member to the Scotland Act. And if he feels very strongly about such things, he may well write to the presiding officer. And could I say, before we move on, that I understand that feelings get high about certain issues, but I am not at all content when I hear rudeness from any benches. And I'd appreciate it if members would bear that in mind. And I now call on Liz Smith to speak to and move Amendment 20625.2 for up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I would like to focus my comments in this debate on my experience as a former member of the corporate body. But may I first say this? May I first apologise to the carers who are in the Parliament today, who I was due to meet at 1:45 and had to cancel. And may I also say, like Mr Rennie said in the Chamber yesterday evening, those of us who are committed Europeans and who voted Remain in 2016 would far rather that the EU flag was still one of the 3 principal flags flown outside this Parliament building alongside the Scottish and UK flags. But we lost that argument, and for all the reasons that have been rehearsed so many times in this chamber in recent months, we accept as Democrats that the UK voted to leave the EU. Indeed, it is now a fact that we are leaving the EU, and this is important in relation to the decision already being made by the present corporate body. Can I remind members that, as set out in the standing orders, the corporate body has a very specific role, one which is entirely different to the other bodies of this Parliament. It is there to make decisions on a wide range of issues which relate to the management of this place, whether they do as budgets or as staffing, accommodation or the use and security of parliamentary resources and facilities, and it carries with it very significant responsibilities in terms of the duties of its elected members. Corporate body members do not sit to make political decisions. Instead, they are elected by the whole Parliament, usually, but not necessarily drawn from each of the political groups that make up that Parliament, to make decisions on an impartial basis that are to the collective benefit of all of us in this Parliament. On that basis, the corporate body has impartial relationships with other parliamentary bodies, such as the Bureau and the Conveners Group, which obviously have responsibility for the day-to-day political business of the Parliament. Corporate body members frequently deal with complex and sensitive issues, including when national security issues come into play. And they can often be party to confidential and private information, not always available to other members of the Parliament. As a result, members will appreciate that it is vital that there is full trust and confidence in the work of the corporate body to act in an impartial manner on behalf of all members, rather than on behalf of the political parties represented in the Parliament. What is particularly important here is Section 21 of the Scotland Act of 1998, which in 21(3) states, and I quote, "The corporation shall provide Parliament, or ensure that Parliament is provided, with the property, staff and services required for Parliament's purposes." And in Section 21(4), it goes on to state that the Parliament may give special or general directions to the corporation for the purpose of or in connection with the exercise of the of course.
Daniel Johnson.
I'm very grateful to Liz Smith for giving way, and I think she makes some important points. And critically and fundamentally, the architecture of these institutions was put together with great care. With the care and the attention and focus being that this is a Parliament that was not in the control of the administration, of the government. And the corporate body, and indeed the Bureau, were put in place to do precisely that. Because it's important, those decisions she just outlined were put beyond party politics. And is that not what is undermined by this decision today?
Liz Smith.
I absolutely agree with the member. It is about collective responsibility, and this is exactly what has happened with the recent decision about the European flag. And I do not believe that it is either appropriate or acceptable to reverse this decision. Indeed, to do so, I believe, sets a dangerous precedent, which would serve to undermine the relationship between the corporate body and the rest of Parliament and the effective workings of Parliament. Yes, of course.
Fiona Hislop.
I genuinely, because I've seen it at first hand, believe in the importance of consensus and the role of the corporate body. However, in a political situation, a highly political situation, which this is, either way, the role for all of Parliament to make a decision is there. That's what happened with the Calman review, which her party was part of in terms of the motion that called and instructed the corporate body. And the presiding officer at the time had no choice, under the explanation she's given, but to carry out the views at that time. Few and far between, but she's wrong to say that it's unprecedented.
Liz Smith.
I'm sorry to completely disagree. I am not wrong. It was not in a situation where it was overturned. What happened in the Calman Commission was an advisory suggestion about extra support that was required for the general workings of this Parliament. I have it here. That's what it was all about. How much time? Now, may I address those who have petitioned to ensure that the EU flag continues to fly outside this Parliament? I respect your views, just as I respect the views of those people who believe that the flag should be removed. Yet the issue before this Parliament this afternoon is not what we think about the withdrawal from of the UK from the EU. It is about whether members of this Parliament are prepared to undermine the corporate body, which we elect and can be overridden by any Scottish Government which happens to get a sufficient number of MSPs to support. Are we well aware of the dangers that that could provide? So it is these issues that principally define the thinking on the Conservative Party this afternoon. I believe many other members in the Chamber agree with us, but there is also another issue. And that is what the public rightly expects of their members as they sit in this Parliament, and ensures that we are accountable for taxpayers' money. Just now, the public can see before us the business in front of us. 6 committee debates, 9 opposition business days, 8 stage 1 debates, 13 stage 3 debates and 88 LCMs. I don't believe for a minute that the public either wants or expects us to be spending time debating what flags are flying outside this building. They want us to sort our schools, our hospitals, our criminal justice system, and get on with addressing the issues that really matter to them in their daily lives. Not only has this government lost its way when it comes to looking after our public services, but it has lost its way when it comes to supporting the conventions of this Parliament. In short, this debate should not be happening, and I move the amendment in my name.
I now call on Claire Baker to speak to and move Amendment 20625.1 for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The debate this afternoon is unfortunate. First is a fact that we are leaving the EU, a decision which I regret, but one which is now unavoidable. Secondly, there is an attempt to frame the debate as some kind of test of our commitment to EU citizens. Many of us are concerned about our EU citizens living in Scotland, and we do need to provide reassurance that they are welcome and valued in Scotland, but this needs to take place in a meaningful way. Thirdly, this is the first time I can recall that the Parliament is prepared to overturn a decision made by the Scottish Parliament corporate body. We have to ask ourselves what that means for the governance of the Parliament. If this vote is won by a small margin and changes the decision of the SPCB, that sets a precedent for a narrow vote to overturn the corporate body. And there is a clear risk of the Scottish Parliament beginning to direct and politicise the corporate body. We elect members to serve on the corporate body. They take on this role from each political party, but they are expected to leave their politics at the door and make decisions for the benefit of this Parliament and all its staff in good faith. I am very short for time.
Jenny Gilruth.
Sorry, I thank Claire Baker for giving way. When a former Labour MSP tabled a motion on this very subject, proud Europeans like her colleague David Stewart and Alex Mohammedan were able to support that motion. Why not today?
Claire Baker.
I think that I am aware of the motion that was previously there, and I understand members have a range of views across the Parliament, but the corporate body is elected to represent the Parliament, and they made the decision in good faith, and I have concerns today about the Parliament being prepared to overturn that decision and undermine our fellow colleagues on that body. Considering the decision, I recognise there is a certain logic to it. The Scottish Parliament flies flags of unions we are a member of. By the weekend, we are no longer a member of the European Union. I have heard the case that it is a Council of Europe flag which was adopted by the European Union, but that does not reflect the reality of how the flag is universally recognised, or acknowledge that the Council of Europe often adapts the flag to distinguish it for its own use. The proposal to fly the EU flag on Europe Day brings the Scottish Parliament policy in line with the Scottish Government's own flag policy for Scottish Government buildings in Scotland. We should respect the independence of the corporate body and respect the decision of its members, a decision which was unanimous until it became a political football. This is not about a government building, which arguably does have a political identity, and it's not about a building owned by one political party, which can exert its will over the operations of Parliament. We are a responsible, elected, respected Parliament, and the neutrality of the institution is important. There will be an important role for Parliament in fostering European and international relationships, recognising the work of the Presiding Officer's office and the work of the International Office. As parliamentarians, we all have a role in welcoming migrants to Scotland and valuing their contribution, and we should be focusing on how we do that. The immigration policy that was published this week could be an example of where we can work together to make a positive difference. I have regard to the argument that challenges whether this is the best use of parliamentary time. While this is a short debate, it has still absorbed the resources of the Parliament in the week that we are leaving the EU. This is the time we should be focusing on the real challenges facing Scotland as a consequence of that decision, which I don't believe is encapsulated in a debate about whether or not to fly a flag. Presiding Officer, if after today the EU flag stays up outside the Parliament, does it really matter? I don't believe it will define our future relationship with Europe, and while the flag reflects our relationship in law, it is not illegal for us to fly the flag. What is problematic is the way in which this debate politicises the decision, undermines the status of the corporate body and questions their ability to act independently of Parliament and leaves the institution open to accusations of political motive. These are the issues we need to reflect on, and I move the amendment in my name.
Colin Ross-Greer for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I appreciate the argument that decisions about the operational matters of the parliamentary estate should not be politicised, but we are long past that option now. There is no, and there was likely never going to be a way to make the binary choice between keeping this flag up and taking it down that wasn't a political choice. It is a political symbol, and what we, the democratic voice of the Scottish people, do with it has significant symbolic meaning. It sends a message, or more accurately, it sends a variety of messages depending on your political persuasion, your citizenship status, or a number of other factors. The Greens believe the European flag should continue to fly, and we will vote for that today. The European flag is not just about the European Union. I'll take just one intervention because I've only got 4 minutes, but I'm happy to take it from Mr Kerr.
Liam Kerr.
I'm very grateful for taking the intervention. I asked for a ministerial statement this week so the Justice Secretary could come here and talk about the state of the police under the SNP and seek solutions. It was refused for lack of time. Instead, we're debating flags and symbolism. Does the member feel any shame or embarrassment that he and his party think this is more important than the funding and resourcing of Police Scotland?
Ross-Greer.
I'm sure Mr Kerr enjoyed that moment of self-indulgence, but I'm going to come to the point of hypocrisy on the part of the Conservatives in a moment. We are debating the European flag, not just the flag of the European Union. It was originally, and it remains, the flag of the Council of Europe, which we remain a part of. That organisation predates the European Union, and it plays an important role, particularly in relation to the European Convention on Human Rights, something which the Conservative Party often suggests that we should perhaps just get rid of. We might be leaving the European Union on Friday, but we are not leaving the Council of Europe. It's important that we continue to acknowledge and value our membership of the Council of Europe. But continuing to fly the flag also sends an important message to European citizens in Scotland. The last 4 years have been an unpleasant experience for them. A great many feel utterly abandoned by a Westminster Parliament and Government which they did previously have respect for. European citizens have been made to feel unwelcome. Discrimination and hate crime across the UK has risen. People who've lived here for decades are being asked to provide proof about their right to continue doing so just to access basic services. Symbols do matter, and for many of the 237,000 EU citizens living in Scotland, our decision to continue flying this flag, a statement of our continued commitment to a common European future, it matters a great deal. I personally don't have a huge amount of interest in flags. Unsurprisingly, I have no affinity for the Union flag, but I don't feel particular affinity for the Saltire either. That's not what motivates my politics. But if continuing to fly the European flag can provide some visible reassurance to European citizens that this Parliament continues to stand up for them, that we are still their representatives as much as anyone else's, then so be it. That alone is good enough reason for me. No, I'm afraid not. I hear the concerns of those outside of this place who are frustrated that Parliament's valuable time, even if just half an hour of it, is being given over to a debate about flags. Those concerns are right, and they're considerably more sincere than those making similar points in here today, but whose parties absolutely wanted this debate to happen precisely so they could make political capital out of it. The Scottish Government has rightly opened itself up to criticism for bringing this to debate without having brought a single debate on our schools for over 2 years. I've been vocal in my criticism of their failure to do that. But we should be totally honest here. The Tories are delighted that this debate is taking place. They really wanted it to, and they reckon that they'll stand to benefit politically from a failed attempt to make the European flag come down over this building, just as the Greens and the SNP will likely come out of this well with those who feel a strong sense of European identity with EU citizens and others. With respect, I'm not sure if anyone will particularly notice Labour's position. The only real losers here are the Liberal Democrats, the party of Europe, who, unless they're about to make some significant U-turn, are set to vote with the Conservatives to take the flag down. I'm just about to round up. I'm actually already over time, I'm afraid. I didn't want this debate, and I'm not the only one, but there was never likely to be another way that a full vote of Parliament to make a binary decision on something which symbolises such a defining issue of our era. We should reflect on that, on the collective failure of our processes, and we should resolve to make sure that debates over flags do not become a recurring feature, regardless of whose partisan interests they serve. That truly would be a failure. But today, given where we are, the Greens will, cast our votes for a symbol of internationalism, of common endeavour, of solidarity, of Scotland's continued commitment to our European future. We will vote to keep the European flag flying over this Parliament.
Now call Liam MacArthur for 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's a matter of deep regret to me that Parliament is having this debate on this government motion and has just been subjected to that contribution from Ross Geer. Not because I don't believe in the partnership of European nations or the values underpinning it. I can safely say that I am a Liberal Democrat precisely because of my party's internationalist outlook. I joined all those years ago because of the long-standing commitment of Liberals to European integration, to arguing for the benefits of pooling and sharing with our European partners. It's why I campaigned hard and with conviction for Remain in 2016, why I was distraught at the outcome of that referendum, and why I was proud of the leading role that Liberal Democrats played in making the case for a people's vote. I worked in Brussels for 5 years, including in the Commission. I remain a loyal member of the Royal Brussels British Football Club, who sit currently top of ABSA Division 1, eyeing up another title for those that may be interested. And I can credibly argue that UK membership of the EU brought me and my now wife together, as we met in Brussels when we were both working there in the mid-90s. So the aspects of the motion that speak of shared, passionate and enduring commitment to the aims of the Council of Europe, democracy, human rights, rule of law and diversity, will find no argument from me. Sadly, though, that is not what this motion is really about. It's not about the Council of Europe, or indeed the European family of nations. This Parliament has flown the European flag since 2004 to reflect our membership of the European Union. That is the reason, that has been the justification, and that is why the motion before us today is so politically charged. Removing the flag does not make the Parliament anti-European, just as leaving it up doesn't make us pro-European. The flags are a statement of legal fact, not of political desire. I have had the privilege of serving on the corporate body since 2011. Having been elected twice by this chamber, I genuinely consider it an honour and take seriously my responsibilities as an SPCB member, as I know do my colleagues. We work together collegiately and constructively, often on difficult and sensitive issues. We recognise that the decisions we take can or potentially could affect the reputation of the Parliament or indeed MSPs. And we do so aware of the political environment in which we operate, but with the aim of protecting the political neutrality of the SPCB and of the Parliament as an institution. It's for that reason that we agreed to lower the European flag on the 31st of January, reflecting the legal position that Scotland, as part of the UK, would no longer be a member of the EU. Does that prospect fill me with joy? Absolutely not. Will I continue to make plain my opposition to Brexit and the act of self-harm I believe it to be? You better believe it. But I also believe that we have a duty as MSPs to protect the neutrality and reputation of this institution. SNP ministers will be free to continue arguing that Brexit makes the case for IndyRef 2. I will disagree, and no doubt we will have those debates in this chamber. Meantime, with everything else that's going on in Scotland at present, this spectacle of this Parliament debating flag policy will strike many as bizarre. But, Deputy Presiding Officer, it's far more serious than that. By seeking to direct the SPCB, this government is moving into uncharted territory and sending a dangerous message about the lengths it's prepared to go to get its own way. It risks calling into question the role and neutrality of the SPCB and opening the door to future decisions being second-guessed by ministers. Future governments of a different political colour, for partisan reasons, may seek to impose their will on this institution. With this decision, we risk giving them permission to do as they please. I don't believe that that's what Fiona Hislop wants. I don't believe that's genuinely what MSPs across this chamber want. And I'm really not sure at all what Alex Neil will be making of all this. But by wrapping not just ourselves but this Parliament in a flag, that is what we risk doing. And I urge colleagues not to support the government motion this afternoon.
That concludes the debate on recognising Scotland in Europe, and it's now time to move on to the next item of business. If you would take your seats as quickly as possible, please.